Hello, guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Skills and Abilities. Today, we're going to be going over the trap skill known as Charged Bolt Sentry. Now, Charged Bolt Sentry is a rather interesting one because its damage output is highly dependent on the skill of the user that is actually using it. And what do I mean by that? Well, charge bolts are a very interesting thing. They have a ability to dish out massive amounts of damage, or they have an ability to dish out basically none. They dish out damage in the amount of damage that they have per bolt. So, for instance, with Charge Bolt Sentry, we're talking about 1,257 damage per bolt. It shoots 10 times, which means that we have a total of, and let's run this on a calculator real quick. We have a total of 11 bolts times 1,257. Which is 13,827. We have times, of course, 10 shots that they can put out, 10 shots. And then we also have 5 traps. So we have a total of 5 traps, which means we have 691,350 total damage output from all 5 traps. But how do you get that, right? If you place your traps wrong, and yes, you can totally place your traps wrong, what you will find out is that the Charge Bolt Sentries are going to do relatively no damage whatsoever. And there's really not much you're going to be able to do about it. So, like, if you're running into a battle, and let's see, these guys are immune to lightning, so that doesn't work. Everybody's immune to lightning over here. I got some poison immunes. But if I cast my little Charge Bolt Sentries, you notice they're just going to spread out all over the place. Not really going to do like a massive amount of damage. It's going to form a field, and the monsters might get hit by 2 or maybe even 3 of those charged bolts, but they're not going to get hit by all of them. If you really want to dish out massive damage with the Charged Bolt Sentry, what you have to do is you have to put them close to the monster, and you have to put them right basically at the monster's feet. And the reason why you're doing this is because you want all the charged bolts to hit the monster at the same time. Now, these guys are immune to lightning, so let me go to a different area that doesn't have a whole bunch of immune to lightning. So I was expecting fire immunes, because I was expecting not those monsters. Let's try Darkwood. Let's see what we've got in Darkwood. So we got a poison immune, right? So if we put the Charge Bolt Sentry here, it's going to dish out small amounts of damage, as you can see, barely enough to even dent the monster's HP. However, if you put the Charge Bolt Sentry directly in front of the monster, like for instance right here, you'll notice that the amount of damage that is done is exponentially higher. And this is because the closer a monster is to the Charge Bolt Sentry, the more of those bolts that can potentially hit the target in a single shot. This means that if you have a large number of Charge Bolt Sentries all stacked up on top of each other, you're going to get more damage that way from a single target being shotgunned. And this is basically how I like to put it, is shotgunned. And of course this guy is just on my cheeks, isn't he? So when you shotgun a target with the Charged Bolt Sentry, you're going to get like 10 times the damage that you would if you're doing it the other way. Because the other way, you're likely only to get 1, maybe even 2 hits. But with the shotgun method, you're going to get basically about 10 shots each. Now, it's highly going to depend on the size of the monster. This is also very important, and the size of the monster does make a huge consideration in how many of these little charge bolts are going to hit them, even if you shotgun them. A Pit Lord, for instance, is a good example because they are a size 3 monster. So if I utilize one of my charged bolt sentries on the Pit Lord, right at his feet like this, the majority of the charged bolts are going to hit the Pit Lord as opposed to some of the smaller monsters in the game. But notice there's still charged bolts that are missing. And this all comes down to placement. You really gotta place the charged bolt sentries like right under their butthole to get the maximum damage output from them. When it comes to single targets that are standing still, you can dish out a pretty decent amount of damage with charged bolt sentry, but it does require proper placement, them standing still. There's a lot of little variables that are involved. It's definitely not the best damage in terms of like wide arcing shots, and in fact the Lightning Sentry is definitely better in those terms because the Lightning Sentry dishes out damage in a straight line, and it's much easier to use in forms of essentially kiting targets, because that's basically what you're doing with it, is kiting in a line. Damage-wise, the Lightning Sentry does 10,418, and it shoots 10 times, and it can be obviously pretty good as well. But if we look at the damage numbers between the two, the previous damage numbers for the Charge Bolt Sentry were pretty darn nice, right? But this one can shoot 10,418. It could shoot 10 times as well, and it does about 104,000, and we multiply that by 5, and we get about 520,000 damage with the Lightning Sentry. This means that the Lightning Sentry can dish out way better damage in the long term, like shooting large groups of monsters, and especially since the Lightning Sentry can pass through enemies and hit the enemy behind. However, I have noticed that when it comes to the Lightning Sentry, because it has such a large variable of 1 to 10,418, you don't necessarily get that high number of damage. In fact, a lot of the times the damage numbers are actually much lower. Whereas when it comes to the Charge Bolt Sentry, because of the general randomness of 11 charged bolts coming out at the same time, you get a better average damage. So when you're talking about the average damage for Charged Bolt Sentry, and this is a good way to actually do this. So let's take 10,418, and we divide that by 2, because that gets us our average damage. And then we multiply that by our 10 shots, which is how many shots we get per sentry. And then we multiply that by the, of course, 5 of them, right? So we have an average damage of about 260,450 per Lightning Sentry, right? Or sorry, per 5 Lightning Sentries. And if you do that for the Charge Bolt Sentry, 1,257. So 1,257 divided by 2 gives us 625 times 11 Charge Bolts times 10 shots, right? 10 shots? Yes. Times 5 gives us a total of 345,675. So as you can see, the 5 coming from the Lightning Sentry at 260,450 is actually less, average-wise, than the Charge Bolts can put out. Which means that versus single targets at close range, as long as you're able to get them close enough, you know, right under the anus of the monster, the Charge Bolt Sentries will actually dish out better damage than the Lightning Sentries, and they will also dish out more better average damage than the Lightning Sentries, which means that in those rare situations when you're fighting, say, like Diablo, you are better off using the Charge Bolt Sentries than the Lightning Sentries, because you can put the Charge Bolt Sentries directly underneath Diablo, and on top of that, he's a size 3 monster, which means he's going to get hit by the majority of the bolts, and there will be less variance because you have so many rolls. You have to imagine that how many rolls there are in 5 Charge Bolt Sentries. There are 5 sentries. They shoot 10 times each. They have 11 bolts per charge, right? So the number of times that you are going to roll your damage on this is 5 times 10, which gives you 50 shots, and they are 11 shots each, which is 550 shots, which means that the chances of you rolling 1 damage on all 550 shots is probably like 0.000000001% chance. The chances of you rolling really low on all of your Lightning Sentries is actually way higher. It's actually in the realm of possibility, because they shoot 10 times, and you have 5 of them, then you only have 50 shots, which means that if you rolled bottom roll on 25 of those shots, it would just absolutely tank the damage on the Lightning Sentry. But the chances of you rolling bottom on 550 shots is next to impossible. So the single target damage on Charge Bolt is actually better. The average damage is better on Charge Bolts, and on top of that, you end up with less bottom rolls on Charge Bolt because of the sheer number of rolls, which means it ends up being more reliable in terms of its damage output. The only real issue with Charge Bolt Sentry is that it doesn't work very well, obviously, for moving targets. You obviously have to put it directly right underneath their anus, and it's not quite as good as dealing damage to multiple targets. Because, of course, the charged bolts are consumed when they hit a target, and this is very important, is that when they are consumed when they hit a target, which means they do not hit anything else. So Lightning Sentry is always going to be better in terms of piercing and hitting multiple targets, because it does pierce and it does hit multiple targets. So again, single target, close range, non-moving, anything else, basically, Lightning Sentry. That's pretty much the gist of it. I'm not sure if I went over this, but let me just triple go over this. Charge Bolt Sentries are no longer considered to be minions in terms of elites, so they no longer stop elite spawns. They are affected by negative resistance, things like Crescent Moon, Griffin's Eye Diadem, Lightning Facets, and so forth and so on. So they do work with negative resistance now. On top of that, they also no longer have the next hit delay issues. All of the traps have been fixed in terms of next hit delay problems. So if there was any next hit delays in terms of the Charge Bolt Sentry, they are pretty much gone. The Shockweb also similarly had a next hit delay issue, and that is gone as well. And if you build Charge Bolt Sentry, you're going to build Shockweb as well. So that's just how it be. As always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watch my videos, even when we're just going over the lowly Charge Bolt Sentry. And as always, keep watching.